poor dudes. Imagine being a fisherman getting blown to bits just to live and become the face of South American drug trafficking. It is completely unjustifiable, completely unacceptable that the administration is very openly killing people overseas, violating the sovereignty of a foreign nation, while simultaneously just like killing people and saying that they're killing people and even making jokes about killing people and jokes about their innocence, the innocence of those they have killed. Donald Trump, on numerous occasions at this point, has made jokes about how, maybe fishermen should think twice before going out to fish off of the coastline of Venezuela. It's f***ing insane. Completely insane. Like, even in the maximalist position of what they're claiming is taking place here, even if these guys are like rugged drug traffickers, okay, straight up, what they're doing here is completely unacceptable. If they are actual drug traffickers, the thing you're supposed to do is communicate with the sovereign nation in an effort to exhaust all options, to say, hey, these are drug traffickers coming from your shorelines. Please, can you apprehend them? And if they don't do that, you're supposed to track these drug traffickers and then intercept their boats once they get to international waters, for example. There is no world where you just go, I've decided these random fishermen are drug traffickers and we're going to f***ing kill them. That is crazy. Like, and I'm saying even if they were drug traffickers, as the administration is claiming, without any evidence whatsoever, I can't believe it. Like, it's so f***ing ridiculous. Aren't these war crimes? Yes, they are. On True and On a few years ago, I predicted if JSOC started doing strikes against drug cartels in Latin America, it would immediately come out that all the victims were innocent people, which never happened in Southwestern Asia because of the much larger cultural and linguistic barriers. This is correct. Our airstrikes do not hit who we say they will hit, and they do not work strategically. We are going to learn that well as this keeps up. Governments in general treat human life with no respect. And especially the American government, whether it be our own citizens, whether it be our own military, and certainly those in the crosshairs. We just straight up have no respect for the dignity of human life. We do not care about it at all. And I don't think this is appropriate. And I don't think this is going to I don't think that this is a moral thing. I don't think that this is appropriate. And I think it's going to get worse. The less restrained this administration becomes, the worse things are going to get, because the next stage in this, the extrajudicial killings of random people overseas, will inevitably loop back around. First, you drone strike random fishermen, then you start drone striking Americans. And a lot of people don't understand that. And at that point, it's too late anyway. That is not that far-fetched or as big a leap as you think it is, okay? Make no mistake. Look at the terrorism designation. Post 9/11, the terrorism designation was a vague standard applied to anyone and everyone that the American government wanted to zap off the planet, okay? And they did so. And over the course of 25 years, we greatly expanded who we called terrorists. And now the Trump administration is using that same vague designation in an unconstitutional manner on enemies that he considers at the domestic level to be terrorists. We didn't get here out of nowhere. This wasn't an overnight change. It's completely ridiculous. We have to put a stop to this.
So the entire relationship stems from the great respect that the two leaders have for each other. China did a substantial, unprovoked escalation last week.
Literally not unprovoked. And also in line with exactly our trade posture against China for decades. This is the same as Israel always does a preemptive first strike, a defensive first strike. And anyone that retaliates against the United States of America is always retaliating, but it's unfair that they're doing so. Always. Venezuela is provoking Trump by existing, for example, existing on top of massive natural oil reserves. This is a provocation that must be addressed. China, over the course of the last 3 decades, has become the manufacturing hub of the planet. This was our design for international trade. America designed the world in this way. Okay, we benefited greatly from it. Problem is, now they got too much power as the manufacturing hub of the entire planet. This is a provocation. This is inappropriate. We must address this. We must blow up the global trade design that we put together for no reason, like for literally no reason other than Trump's endless need for money molestation. Donald Trump is attributing American international trade policy for the past 3 or 4 decades directly to Democrats and even Republicans that have played a formative role in this design, because this design has allowed China to get unimaginable power, becoming the international manufacturing hub with a robust industrial base. And instead of Donald Trump getting mad at the capital owners that played a major role in seeking out a cheaper labor market and completely restructuring the global economy to be reliant on China as the manufacturing hub, instead of getting mad at the forces of capital that have played a role in this grand design, he's just saying, oh, these guys just made they made tremendous mistakes in international trade policy. The reason why he's saying that is because obviously, as a billionaire, he himself is also one of those people who benefited from this relationship. That's why the Donald Trump ties or any number of different like Donald Trump products were also being manufactured in China. And they still are. That's why half of his merch is coming from China. The problem with China, from the American perspective, is that they weren't kept servile. They were able to take advantage of the unlimited greed of Western capitalists to get an unprecedented amount of foreign capital to come into their country, and then use that foreign capital to engage in rapid urbanization and even development. If China had stayed unstable, if China had the same internal issues that India has, for example, that made it much easier for there to be a capitalist oligarchy style structure, then I don't think we'd be talking about China at all. Or at least we wouldn't be considering China a foreign adversary at all. We would be looking at China just like we look at India. The problem is China took that foreign capital and distributed it. China took that foreign capital and not developed at the behest of their own national capital owners, but at the behest of all of China and all of the Chinese workers, uplifting the material conditions of the Chinese working class across the board. That's the real issue. And now that centralized structure of governance is tremendously advantageous, especially when there is global political competition, because China gets to make decisions at the top that are, one, beneficial for its own working class, and two, China can dramatically restructure their economy almost overnight if they choose to do so. This is not something that the decentralized system of capitalists, the decentralized system of governance that Western liberal capitalist nations have. They work at the behest of capital, where in China, capital is still a servant of the government. Now, this is still problematic in some sorts, especially if the government no longer wants to operate in the direction of uplifting the material conditions of the working class. If overnight China decided, no, we're going to also be we're going to operate in the same way that like a fascist government would work, they could do so. I'm sure that there would be rebellion if that were to take place, but so far they have not done so. But that is the problem with at least the American position here. It's a problem when it comes to manufacturing, because while Western liberal capitalist countries also have a system of subsidies, what corporate overlords do with said subsidies is very different than what the Chinese state forces companies to do. or I mean, it's not an enforcement necessarily, but because they control the flows of capital internally inside of the country, they can change the incentive structure to get people to move into other sectors in a way that is much faster than the ways that this would work in a Western liberal democracy. They can move the money around, and when they move the money around, they can get people to focus on building up different sectors that are necessary for whatever goals that the government has. I think another advantage of central planning and the system of governance that China has is that it has allowed them to set in motion 15-year plans and now 5-year plans, whereas Western liberal capitalist countries do not have that same structure. They do not have that same mechanism of control, or even if they did, because at the end of the day, states are incredibly powerful entities, right? The American government, if it chooses to do so, could actually, maybe not overnight, but and with a series of capital strikes and capital revolts, would be able to create a centrally planned economy as well. It would take a lot. It would require a lot of effort. It would require tremendous labor militancy, for example. But they could do that. It's not impossible. Every Western liberal capitalist nation could technically become a command economy, could have central planning if they chose to do so. We have a version of central planning in this country. Look at our agri sector. Look at the agribusiness, for example, right? It's just that we demand nothing in return for the subsidies, the taxpayer-funded subsidies, from the capital owners, because that's not the way this is supposed to be designed. The system is designed for capital owners to do whatever the they want. And over time, we have increasingly financialized our economy and worry about fake improvements in the stock prices, because everything still goes back to improving shareholder value, increasing shareholder value. This forces the American government and the powerful, the class of capital owners in America to focus on short-term profits. This makes it impossible for the United States of America to have like a 10-year plan or a 15-year project. There is a reason why China could just like prop up the world's tallest bridge virtually overnight for pennies on the dollar, or develop thousands of miles of high-speed rail since the year 2000, whereas in the United States of America, high-speed rail projects take decades and get nothing accomplished. It's not that the government has no power. It's that the government, the purpose of the government in Western nations is not to make these sorts of projects happen. It's to keep funneling money into unnecessary and increasingly costly middlemen. Yes, but sitting in a cubicle pushing pencils is far more prestigious than working with your hands. Would you suggest that the middlemen actually make something themselves? I mean, that's not even what I'm talking about. This isn't even about like productive labor versus different forms of labor. I'm not even getting into that. I'm simply talking about like the broader outlook here, that ultimately the American government is servile to capital and capital interests, and capital interests always revolve around improving profit margins for shareholders, increasing shareholder value. It's literally in the law. The boards have a fiduciary responsibility. If you are trying to compete against a country that doesn't have that interest whatsoever and simply wants to make government projects happen, or simply wants to outcompete Western industry in certain sectors, whether it be solar panels or whether it be drone manufacturing or whether it be electric vehicle manufacturing, for example, they are going to make a lot of investments into this field, and they are going to make prices so unimaginably affordable that it is virtually impossible for Western liberal capitalists to compete with them. It's just not going to happen unless Western capitalists either do one of two things. One, they can try to make new rules around global trade, which is what they are trying to do right now. Make it illegal for Chinese goods to enter the European markets, for example, or the American markets, which is, once again, a nuisance for Western capital owners because of the way that they have designed global trade. The other thing they could potentially do is take a hard look at the way that they have approached manufacturing and the way that they have organized their system of governance under a capitalist organization of the economy and restructure it. Restructure it so that they have they have an opportunity to actually outcompete China. Now, that's going to be very difficult because China has decades and decades of building a robust industrial base in their country. They have a 30-year head start.
Yes, sir. So the entire relationship stems from the great respect that the two leaders have for each other. China did a substantial, unprovoked escalation last week.
Literally not unprovoked. And also in line with exactly our trade posture against China for decades.
I don't care about all that stuff. I just care about saving lives. But this will be number 9. But every time I solve one, they said, sir, if you solve one more, you're going to be known as a peacekeeper. So to the best of my knowledge, we've never had a president that solved one war. Not one war. Bush started a war. A lot of them start wars, but they don't solve the wars. They don't.
I think one of the craziest parts about this, as he angles himself as the peace president, is that there is a former president who did stop a war. His name was Joseph Robinette Brandon. That's not even a joke. Like, he did do that. And everyone yelled at him for doing it at the time, except for people like myself and like the Chapo boys and Majority Report. There were very few allies on Biden's side on that issue. And of course, Biden then turned around and destroyed his legacy that will be forever tarnished because he turned around and gave Benjamin Netanyahu a bear hug after October 7, allowing Israel to do unlimited genocide. When Donald Trump says he's the peace president, what's so crazy about it is that like Joe Biden could have been definitionally the peace president if he demanded restraint from Israel, if he had, the Afghan withdrawal was one, but then on top of that, if he actually immediately insta-locked Israel into a restrained position, he could have been seen as a peace president. And I don't even think Donald Trump would be president right now if he had done that. Of course, for that to also happen, he would have to not be an ultra-Zionist. Of course, for that to happen, he would also have to not be incredibly old. But, such is the nature of politics, I guess. But it is funny when Donald Trump tries to claim he's the peace president, when not only is he trying to wage war, not only is he trying to wage war in Venezuela, not only did he continue Israel's genocide for 9 extra months when he had every opportunity to stop Israel dead in his tracks as soon as he came into office, which he did entertain for a brief moment. But he's also doing war on U.S. soil. The only reason why it hasn't completely turned into a full-blown war is that he's posturing and he's aggressively trying to get some kind of retaliation from the public, and the public is just not giving it to him. That's it. Because there is no other reason to send in the military to all of these blue cities other than try to get the people riled up enough that like someone ends up getting shot. That's it. There is nothing peaceful about like Donald Trump is unironically doing the domestic version of what he's doing in Venezuela, which is obviously supposed to be a little bit more restrained in democratic cities right now. That's what he's doing. He's like circling around and deploying the military to blue cities in an effort to foment some sort of civil unrest. It is fucking insane. And we're supposed to sit here and be like, that's my peace president, dude. I retweeted Armand, the #1 China glazer, yesterday on this issue, where he actually brought this down. Arnaud Bertrand, #1 China glazer. Cambodia and Thailand, it was a border conflict that ended thanks to mediation by Malaysia. All Trump did was a phone call threatening tariffs. Kosovo and Serbia, there was no war. DRC and Rwanda, war did not end. Violence continues. Pakistan and India, India is adamant there was no U.S. mediation. Israel and Iran, the U.S. was literally a belligerent, obviously. Remember, the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Egypt and Ethiopia, there was no war. Armenia and Azerbaijan, the peace deal hasn't actually been signed. Israel and Hamas, beyond obscene for the U.S. to take credit for ending a genocide that it was a key enabler of. Doesn't this guy own Louis Vuitton? No, that's a different Arnaud. That's so funny. Yeah. One of the world's wealthiest billionaires who happens to sit on top of the throne of Louis Vuitton, also seems to be a prolific Twitter poster who defends China all the time.